Hey, Johanna, Mr. Riggs here. Hope you're doing well and having a great week. Here is your first video edit for a writing project, specifically the 9/11 essay. And what we've done here is exactly what's going to happen the rest of the semester. Is that whole 3C process that I talked about at the end of this past Tuesday, which is create. So you've created, right? And then there's critique, which is what this video is meant to offer. And then there's collaborate. So that's your reception of the critiques and observing them and thinking about them and processing them, which we'll do together a little bit on Tuesday as well. And I just want to thank you for uploading this to your Google folder and just really appreciate how much work you put into this essay as well. Great job. Also, thank you for putting your name and writing in Times New Roman. That was awesome. All right. So just a few things that were either just kind of small points to clarify, or maybe more habitual things within your writing that we want to kind of work on as we move forward. Um, but things like dates are always tricky, right? And there might be a lot of rules surrounding it. But here's kind of a quick tutorial that when we have just the month and the day, it's really best to write them in their numbers, not so much writing them out, because obviously anyone reading this is going to assume 9/11 means the date. But as you could probably guess, that could easily be confused with an address, the time, even, right? So when we want to represent a date without the year, it really is best to just use the numbers for the month backslash and then the day. And it even kind of pops a little bit more if you think about it aesthetically. Just kind of carries a different type of weight. But great title, fantastic, nice job. Great introductory paragraph. You did this perfectly. You brought the reader in. I tell folks, you're going to hear about this in workshop. Uh, the introductory paragraph should do two things. It should be a billboard and a roadmap, or a Google map, even if you have to use it, right? So a billboard, right? It's meant to catch your attention, doesn't give a ton of information right away, but it kind of pulls you in, right? This is a great way to do that with these first few sentences here about the date and what happened. Secondly, the roadmap, and that's your thesis, right? That's you telling the reader, and here's what you're gonna learn. Here's a summary statement, one sentence of what you're about to embark on as you look into this essay. So this is a great introductory paragraph. Nice job. Few little comments here. When we write out, then, so another thing about the date, I know dates, dates, dates. When we write out an entire date, so month, the word, and then the number, and then the year. First off, great job remembering that a comma goes after the year. Not everyone remembers that. But we need to make sure that we don't write out the number. We can actually just put in the number just like that. Okay. One other thing here. Notice how, and I highlighted this for you instead of removing it. On September 11th, 2001, the United States was hit by a tragic loss by a terrorist attack. That's not bad writing, but we want to make sure we avoid unnecessary repetition, especially with these words that are called prepositions, right? So by is a preposition, and it's kind of this gluing word. It glues things into a sentence, and when we have too many, it can start to make sentences unnecessarily long. So here's one option for you: is to take this phrase by a tragic loss, by a terrorist attack, and change it to something like this. On September 11th, the United States suffered a tragic loss, right, from a terrorist attack. So it still keeps what you had in there, but see how changing it up a little bit helps the momentum of the sentence. So that would be one that I would kind of keep in mind is watching how often the word by comes up in one sentence. With abbreviations like with the morning, we can lowercase those. And again, here with the number, if it's over 10, you don't need to write it out. So you can just put the number 11. Uh, this right here, great sentence. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure to do that. When we have a comparison adjective like lower or higher or faster or stronger, right? Those are comparing two things. So South Tower is being compared with something, which is obviously the North Tower. Now, if this sentence came right after the one about the North Tower, you may not need to say it. But because there's a little bit more that the reader has to go through before they get to this sentence about the South Tower, we need to kind of make sure we just remind the reader, hey, slightly lower than the North Tower. Okay. And then great job on this. You're almost there with a thesis. You're like right on the fence because you kind of narrow the focus, but I think you either missed a word or something happened because it was just not as focused as it could be. There have been many advances since 9/11. Great. And things were very something then, right? I think if you had the word in there, the problem would have been dealt with. But just remember, with a thesis, you're trying to say something very specific, which again, I think you were trying to get after. Okay, just a few more things real quick, and then I'm gonna stop this video before we get to 10 minutes here. With words, so here with security, if you read this sentence out loud again, right? Before the catastrophic events of 9/11, security was very different. Now, especially with a phrase like security, that could mean anything, right? It could mean airport security, mall security, that could mean air traffic security, that could be personal security. You know, a variety of securities come to mind. And while you wouldn't be wrong if that was your point, you actually talk about a very specific type of security. So let's just make sure we are clarifying for the reader which security we mean. And then these types of phrases, and I've mentioned this to a lot of people, and this is something I did as a writer all the time, are these what a writing coach of mine calls hit you over the head statements. So some examples of this, right, of these changes uh, are back then you could bring, right? These hit you over the head statements are not necessary, only because while we want to help the reader along as much as possible, these types of statements tend to tell them, hey, I can't trust you with where you're going, so I'm going to grab your hand and kind of pull you along, right? So the intention is great. The point is that you're trying to make sure the reader heads in a certain direction. We can trust the reader enough, though, to just start this statement here. You could bring any sort of blade 4 inches long or smaller, right? Or and smaller, exactly. Um, so just want to kind of clarify that real quick. And then these few other things, again, just wanted to say great job concluding that paragraph. As we get to the bottom here, make sure that you are choosing words. So, sorry, one thing we're going to talk about in a workshop is word choice, right? Word choice is half of the writing battle. And a lot of words we kind of know are going to come to us kind of easily, or we're going to work on them. But when we have these words that mean like they're big words like ecosystems, right? We need to make sure we know the words we're using. And I'm not sure if the word ecosystems is appropriate here because most definitions of ecosystem have to do with kind of nature. It has to do with what's a part of an animal's geographical location that lets them thrive, right? So better communication, such as networks that now pass over whole ecosystems, that may be what you meant, but all of a sudden it's kind of confusing and kind of jars the reader a little bit. So I wasn't sure if you meant whole agencies that, now the FBI and CIA are talking to one another or what have you. So just word choice things there may go a long way. And then just sh- pulled out and did some strike throughs of places where I hope you see. So the words were there and they were doing something, but they weren't necessary. And we only want to try to use words that are absolutely necessary, and that sort of thing. But other than that, this was a great essay, and it was just those few things of making sure that we clarified for the reader what we were talking about. Maybe pulling out something that was redundant or being repeated. But the hardest part of this, right, is the essay organization, and you did a marvelous job with that. So, way to go, and I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday to talk more about what to do with these edits.